Right, Celynn Morin is an expert on wellbeing. She's known as the wellbeing whisperer. She's a really good friend of mine. We sometimes spend nights in the same hotel together, don't we? But in separate rooms. We were actually at an event together a couple of months ago, and Celynn is a big believer in getting up really early in the morning and going for a walk. And she was talking about that yesterday, and I challenged her afterwards and said, "You are such a liar." Because when we were there last time, I said to everyone, "I'm getting up at 6, I want to get 10,000 steps in, who wants to come for an hour's walk with me at 6 a.m? And she didn't turn up to it. And she corrected me with my complete false memory syndrome. She'd actually missed our last get-together and hadn't been there. So I'd entirely made that up and blamed her wrongly. But she's going to be speaking on performance chemistry. It's a nice interactive talk, but in a really gentle way. As I said first thing this morning, no one's going to get picked on, is that right?
Exactly.
No one's going to get picked on till I come back on stage. Right, Celynn Morin.
I was actually a long way from the hotel. I was in South Africa. So performance chemistry, what is that? It's about how we can use our chemistry to better support our performance. What I mean by chemistry, it's not things that we mix together in test tubes, it's your internal chemistry. Because we know that your physiology determines not just your performance, but your psychology. So we're really going to look at the fundamental things that we should be paying attention to, at least being curious about, if we want to sustain high performance and energy and resilience and all the things that we need in this crazy, changing, adventurous life that we find ourselves in. So my aim for today is to remind you about a lot of the things that you know already. This is not rocket science. But through the nature of doing this work a lot, I realized that common knowledge isn't common practice. So we're also going to end with, okay, how do we make this practical depending on what your lifestyle is like? Because just like I've used a fingerprint there in the heart, is we're all unique. So I'm going to share the fundamentals, what the science seems to say, this is what we need for better performance. But ultimately, you are you. So I'd invite you to take what you feel will work for you and your lifestyle, and always think about consistency versus intensity. Because if all the stuff was easy around well-being, we would be happier, healthier, fitter, and I wouldn't have a job. So it's not that simple. So we're going to share some of the complexities, and I'm going to share some frameworks that work for me. I personally teach this because it's what I need to most learn myself. And I'm deeply passionate about helping carers, which is what you are. You wouldn't do this work if you didn't care. But often, carers care too much. And we pour out and out and out, and we get so depleted, and our chemistry is just completely out of whack that we can't then support performance. So does it sound useful if by the end of, in the next 35 minutes, we go inward, because I know how outward-facing you are, and you do not feel selfish, because this is about self-care. So how can you leave, not with 3 things, just one thing? That's what I invite you to do, is take one thing that you will pledge into action that could help you shift your energy and your performance. Does that sound like a good outcome? Mm-hmm. All right. So as I just mentioned, self-care is not selfish. I actually feel that as HR professionals and a healthcare professional, we have an ethical responsibility to looking after ourselves. Because with everybody else around you, you'd want them to care for themselves, right? So I'm here to remind you, because once we have a why, it's easier to find a how. The reason why we're talking about this topic, which we think should be just obvious, but it isn't, is that you owe yourself the same amount of love, care, and attention that you give to others. And as I mentioned, if this was always easy, we would all be doing it. So I think it's also important to be curious, but also compassionate. And when we have lots of energy and resilience and we perform well, that means we get done our work in less time, potentially, with more energy for more things. And when we have energy, we can move mountains, right? But it's when you don't have energy, when you feel burnt out, deflated, tired, cynical, jaded, or overwhelmed, that then everything seems like a mountain to climb. So for me, your one strategy that you're going to leave with today can be your strategy towards owning the title CEO. Now, that can be Chief Energy Officer, but because I love everything to do with champagne, I know I sound South African. Well, I am South African, but my parents went to South Africa on honeymoon and then stayed there for a long time, so I was born in South Africa, but my parents and everybody else in the family is from Champagne in France. So for me, CEO stands for Chief Effervescent Officer. So how can you stay effervescent? Because, if we just look at everything that's happening, I mean, just the discussion by Daniel on ChatGPT is enough to make you feel very deflated and flat and overwhelmed. How do we sustain the sense of effervescence and joy, or as the French say, joie de vivre? And not only how to do it, but why. And a concept that's not often spoken about in terms of well-being is that it gives us margin. So what is margin? Margin is the gap between what you have and what you need. When we don't have time, when we don't have margin in terms of time, we know what that's like, right? You run late, potentially you work too fast, you make mistakes. When we don't have margin in our relationships, it can feel like we walk on eggshells all the time and we're more reactive than responsive. When we don't have margin financially, we know what that's like, right? And a lot of people that we care about are experiencing that stress. And we can't change a lot to do with economics and money and time, but what we can do is look at how we can build physical margin, so more energy, emotional margin, so more emotional resilience, the ability to do what Anthony said, have conscious questions and agile thinking, and also mental margin so that we can use this 4-pound universe on our shoulders a lot easier. So how do we do that? Because if we want more physical, mental, or emotional well-being, or maybe even meaning, we need to look at fundamentals, because I'm sure you'll agree. Physically, if you're feeling tired, and you're dehydrated, and your blood sugar's all over the show, maybe you have a headache, you're not going to show up at your best emotionally, right? Let alone be able to think clearly for long periods of time, let alone have energy for contribution and meaning and giving back. So they're all interconnected, but I really want us, over the time that we have together today, to relook at how you can be sure that you have a solid physical base, because that's where our chemistry starts. That's where the physiology and psychology then gets influenced. And I'm all for practical as opposed to theory, so we're going to start with a practical exercise that helps actually, not just with building physical margin, but it can have an immediate impact on your brain and your heart. What I'd like to invite you to do is the stress balls that are in front of you, imagine they are, I don't know, lemons. I was in Italy last week, drinking limoncello. Any Italians in the room? Okay, I did not know that pizza should be consumed with beer. Well, at least in Tortoreto, south of Pescara, I was not wine. So anyway, back to limoncello. You've got a lemon in your hand. Squeeze the lemon as if you really want to get all the juice out, all the juice. So keep squeezing it. Squeeze it a little bit more. What's happened to your breath? Holding it, right. Okay, you can relax the lemon now. We'll come back to that a little bit later. So there's a direct correlation between muscle tension and holding our breath, and the other way around. What is the trigger, though, to the muscle tension and holding our breath? The stress response. So when we feel stressed, which can be a thought, an email, a person, almost from the moment we wake up, and we're going to talk about how you can increase that margin of when you wake up before you get pulled into the fight, flight, freeze, fold response. That's when you have adrenaline pushed into your system, and that'll make you breathe faster. Hence, your breathing changes and your muscles start to tense, mine especially around my jaw. So one practical tip is breathe. How are you breathing now? May I invite you to take a deep breath, like the deepest breath you've taken all day. Try not to move your shoulders when you breathe in, so you force the air down here into your belly. And then when you exhale, let your shoulders drop. Even if you just imagine them dropping towards the ground a little bit more. Relax your jaw, and maybe open and close your mouth. I'm the only one who'll see you. So pull some faces. Because we create a lot of tension around the neck and the shoulder, especially behind our computers. There's something called email apnea. Do you know apnea is when you don't breathe well at night, potentially then you snore, and very bad for your health. So too is when you're at your desk and you're holding your breath and leaning forward, because the stressor is Teams rebooting, or that 37th email that you've read for the day, or the policy that you've got to rewrite, or that ChatGPT isn't working and you're doing a live presentation, whatever it might be. So your breath is a powerful tool. If it's not one in your toolkit that you're curious and experimenting with, I really invite you to do that. Breathing gives you oxygen. It's one of the vital ingredients for your system, for your chemistry, for your physiology. Now we're going to go into a framework that's going to answer this question that's on the screen. If your body were to give you a score, so without using your head, if we were to go down into your body and say, hey, give me a score out of 10, what do you think it'll be? 10 being amazing, you're fit, you're healthy and strong, and then 0 being there's a lot you could be doing. Don't answer the question, because you're going to have an answer. more of an objective answer than a subjective one in a moment, because I'm going to take you through a framework that I started putting together and have used since 2006. So that was after 6 years of clinical practice as a dietitian, and I was feeling frustrated because nobody goes to a dietitian for fun. Perhaps today, because of the awareness around nutrition. But back then, I was seeing diabetics and people with irritable bowel syndrome and heart disease, and I really wanted to work more in the preventative, proactive health space. So fortunately, I came across Vitality Health, and we did some cool projects together, and since then, this is what I do. This is my jam. This is what I love doing, is helping individuals in the work context think about performance and well-being. And you have such an influence by virtue of your role modeling that simply by your actions, you can potentially help those around you to look after themselves without telling them what they could potentially be doing differently. So the Wellculator, we're going to visit 10 different destinations. It's quite a quick tour. If you feel that after today you want more information on any one of these 10 topics, you will have my contact details. I am one of your wellbeing partners if you would like that. You can just send me a message on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook, on email, through my website, and say, hey, I was interested in this or that. I've got lots of resources, YouTube videos, things I can share with you. And if I can't help you, I'll do my best to find someone or a resource in my network that can. Because the world needs more of us that are vital and well and have a bit of a joie de vivre despite what's happening around us. So we're going to go through the Wellculator quickly. You're going to score yourself as we go through this together. What I invite you to do is use the big card, save the small card to maybe go through it with somebody that you love and care about. And this big one, you can actually, once you've scored yourself, use it again 2 or 3 times. And I suggest coming back to the Wellculator maybe every 2 or 3 months, say every season. It's a tool that I use myself and with my clients. So you answer yes if you do the activity 80% of the time. So not 100, not all the time. We are not looking for perfection. In fact, if you do too much, too quickly, all at once, like diets, what happens? Well, you're on the diet, and like the first 3 letters of the word diet gives you an idea of what they're about. They take a lot of effort and strain. It's about loss aversion. We cut things out, and then by Thursday, life happens. We then say, oh, I'll just start again next Monday. And next Monday becomes, I'll just start again after winter or in the new year. So we don't want perfection. But you do need to be doing it most of the time. If it's yes, 1 point. If it's no, no point. And I'll guide you for half points. So let's start with number 1. Do you strategically refuel for sustained energy? That means you eat in such a way that helps you manage your energy and gives your body the nutrients it needs. Some of us have different plans. Some of us are good on keto. Some are like, I can't do keto. Not good for my genes. But at least you have a strategy that you put in place most of the time, and you avoid things like snackcidents and skipping meals and that kind of thing. So 1 for yes, no point if you don't do that. Number 2, do you eat like an artist? Now, when I say eat like an artist, it means you have lots of color in your diet. Color does not come from Skittles, wine gums, M&Ms, Doritos. Sorry, comes from nature's colorful palette, so vegetables, salads, and fruit. Enough means about 10 servings. A serving is the size of this stress ball on most days of the week. Very important for gut health. And gut health gives you margin, big time. The healthier your gut, the healthier your brain, the healthier your immune system, the less sick you get. Or when you do fall ill, you bounce back a lot faster. I don't think we're talking enough about gut health in the context of mental health, but that will change, I'm sure. So do you eat like an artist? Then let's just focus on lunch. Do you generally, most days of the week, have a mindful lunch? That means that you step away from your desk and eat and enjoy your meal for, say, 15 or 20 minutes at least. Because that's how long it takes your stomach to stretch and release pepsin that goes up to your brain center, appetite center, and says, thank you, I've had enough to eat. Right. Then number 4, let's just focus on hydration. Do you hydrate enough for you not to be dehydrated? And to me, everything needs to be quantified if we can. So what is enough? Generally, I find 1 glass of water per 10 kilograms is a good baseline. So are you having a glass of water, which is 250 mils, per 10 kilograms that you weigh? And that's over and above regular tea and coffee, because those are diuretics. This is really a quick win in terms of sustaining some energy. The number 5 is double-barreled. So let's do, for half a point, you're a non-smoker. So if you're a non-smoker, half a point. For the other half, do you know some of your health numbers? So every year, are you checking, as a minimum, cholesterol and blood sugar? Over and above that, you can measure whether you're actually absorbing the vitamins that you take, so you're not wasting money. You can also do genetic testing. It's becoming a lot more available. These are all tests that you can order online. They get delivered to your home, and you can do a finger prick and get some fascinating insights into your blueprint. So you know that your exercise plan, your supplements, your diet is actually working for you. Because just because it was a bestseller doesn't mean it's the best plan for you. That's where the uniqueness comes in. Then we're going to talk a little bit about this in a moment. But basically, most days of the week, do you wake up feeling rested? I can just tell by the murmur in the room that that's probably yes or no. Most days of the week, 80% of the time, do you wake up feeling rested? And then, number 7, do you have strategies that help you keep a positive mindset? Just like we should do exercise to keep physically fit, we need to keep our brains mentally positively fit, because we live in a society that encourages scarcity and fear. So, especially with the fast-changing pace of what's going on around us. These kind of strategies can be journaling, time in nature, meditation, mindfulness, gratitude, whatever works for you, but you're doing it a little bit most days, so that you could call it a practice. Then do you move enough during your work day? So do you avoid sitting for longer than an hour? You should not be sitting for longer than an hour. You should stretch 2 to 3 minutes, sit, stand, desk, walk and talk. If you can, go for a walk in the middle of the day. That's an excellent strategy. But you're conscious of your breathing. Like right now, how's your breath? You might have forgotten about it because we stopped speaking about it. Take another deep breath in. And then as you exhale, let any tension around your face, your jaw, your shoulders leave. It's these little micro things that we do and practice. It's like salt and pepper in food that enhances how our body and our chemistry and our physiology can feel. Then we also need, number 9, enough exercise. So let's make this one double-barreled. So for half a point, do you feel like you do enough exercise? Yes or no? If you say, yes, I do, give yourself half a point. If you're like, no, not really, I could do more, I'd like to do more. No point. And do you stretch? So a few times in the week, are you doing some kind of stretching? Because the older we get, the more important stretching is for flexibility and to avoid injuries and to stay supple, and also to release the fascia, which is part of the musculature. And then the last point, which we've spoken about already, do you know when you are feeling stressed? Ideally before it's too late, so before you've thrown something or shouted at the driver that's pulled in, and have you got techniques in real time that you can use to help regulate the stress response, such as deep breathing, relaxation, reframing, helicoptering up out of the situation? We cannot wait till weekends to recover from stress anymore. We need to be able to do it real time, because if not, it builds up, and we get so agitated that we're wired and tired and we can't sleep at night. So add up your score today. You should have a score of 10. And the average generally is around 4. And yesterday there was a 4 and below. Hands up. Let's see. All right, 4 and below. 4.5 to 7.5. Oh, higher than yesterday. And then 8 and above? Okay, thank you. Even if you have a score of 8, let's say the 2 that you answered no to were maybe the fact that you'd hardly sleep, you smoke and you don't exercise. You can see how that's still not great, right? So the Wellculator is not about a low score being bad and a high score being good. It is about the identifying potential, like where you're doing great and potentially where you could be doing better if you want more energy and performance. So now that we know potentially, okay, there's some room for improvement, how could we look at this? Well, a framework that I like to use a lot, and I just think nature in itself is a food group, right? It's so important. And if we look at the seasons, so spring, summer, autumn, winter, let's overlap this onto a 24-hour day for you. So spring is when you wake up in the morning. So it's as you, I don't know if that's with an alarm or by yourself or with dogs or kids, or when you wake up and you become conscious. up until summer starts, when your stress response will be engaged by the outside world. Probably because you've looked at your phone and answered emails or Slack messages or WhatsApp or listened to the news or gone onto social media where you don't really know what's coming. And then you're busy all day long dealing with all the issues that we are dealing with until you go, maybe, I was going to say go home, but if you're working from home, that's where a lot of lines are being blurred, right? You just step out the room that you're in or go back to the dining room table a bit later. And then just like in nature, winter doesn't just arrive. We have this period where the leaves start to change color, the days get a bit shorter, the temperatures drop. We also need a wind down before we get into bed, put our head on the pillow, and want to then sleep for the next 7 to 9 hours. Hopefully, that's the amount of time that a lot of us seem to need. So let's take a look at the start of the day. What is your spring like? If it's a good spring, it is like what Daniel said, is we should actually wake up in the morning, and before we engage with technology and the outside world, if you can, let yourself be exposed to natural light. I don't know if anybody's heard about how beneficial that is for our brain chemistry. I'm someone who suffers with insomnia, and this has been one of the best strategies. I have done everything that a person needs to do for the 2 hours before going to bed to relax. From smelling lavender, to having stuff on my pillow, to heavy blankets, to bathing, to digital detoxes. And the one thing I tried that then made the biggest difference was nowhere near bedtime. But it was in the morning, within 90 minutes of waking, to spend 15 minutes outside, even if it's cloudy, to let the natural light in. So if you struggle with sleep and you're not doing this, try it. Don't take my word for it. I always say to people, don't take my word, let your body tell you. So go out and try these things and then see. But spending a little bit of time outdoors, and maybe you can't get outdoors because there's kids and pets and commuting and lots to do, but could there be 3 minutes at the kitchen window, looking outside before you look down on your screen? Because a lot of us are waking up, and within seconds, we're reaching over and grabbing our phones, especially if they're close to us, right? So proximity equals destiny. We'll use them if they're in the bedroom. You can buy regular alarm clocks. Yeah. And if you're using your phone, like I travel a lot, so I spend a lot of time in hotels, of course I'm going to use my phone, but I use the do not disturb function. So your phone can be on flight mode, for instance, or certain apps can only switch on at 8 o'clock and switch off at 9:45 in my case. If you do not control these devices, they are controlling you. Fact. So how long is your spring? Is it 30 seconds? Is it 3 minutes? Is it half an hour? Whatever it might be, let's say it's immediate. Great improvement would be to go to the bathroom first, not take the phone with you, and then look at the phone. That's huge improvement. Or maybe you could go down to the kitchen or go and spend 5 minutes looking outdoors, getting some natural light in, and then start to engage with the outside world. Because when we wake up, would you agree that your nervous system is probably the most relaxed it's going to be the whole day? Even if you've had a restless night's sleep, your parasympathetic nervous system has been engaged. That's the rest and digest. So important. We've heard, I'm sure you're hearing about vagal tone and the vagus nerve and how this enteric nervous system, the gut, connects to the heart, connects to the brain. Magic happens when we sleep and rest. So when you wake up from that magical space, even your brain has slowed down, right? It's gone down to delta theta brainwave. Then you wake up. If you engage with something that's going to pull you out of that really quickly, you go straight through alpha into beta brainwave, stress response, adrenaline, cortisol, inflammation starts. And that's aging and tiring. So if you can strengthen or lengthen that time a bit, who knows how you may feel. And really, it can be a matter of going from a few seconds to 5 minutes to maybe half an hour, or make it 45 minutes if that's something that you find you can do. Another reason why we should think about how we start our mornings is you could wake up feeling pretty good. But you don't know that if you don't check in with yourself first, and you check in with what Twitter's saying and Instagram's doing and feeling. Yeah, I can see a lot of nods. So how about I try and always answer the question, even if it's just in my head while I'm lying in bed, how do I want to feel today? How do I want to feel today? And it might be different on different days. Playful, curious, focused, hardworking, stressed, angry, because it's appropriate to feel angry sometimes. But if we don't give our emotions time to come up, what happens is what we suppress, our bodies will express. And often that ends up being at night when you're most vulnerable and surrendered. That's why you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't fall back to sleep, or at 4 o'clock in the morning, or it comes out as physical symptoms. You know, this is not woo-woo stuff. We know this, that all illness generally is linked to some kind of emotion. So Dr. Gabor Mate, is anybody following him? A wonderful physician, yeah, who wrote the book, several books, but in particular, When the Body Says No. Your body will say no if we don't express those emotions. So generally, I find this a lot. People wake up in the morning and it's morning mayhem, so we grab a cup of coffee, then it's back-to-back meetings, either at home or in the office, back-to-back cups of coffee. When we stop for lunch, we don't really stop because we've got our devices, maybe our laptop there. We look for a snack in the afternoon that's either salty or sweet, or maybe another cup of coffee. And by the time we get home and the day ends, we're so famished that we eat more than we need, maybe with wine and chocolate. That book ends that. Oh, see, I was just going to say, can anyone resonate with aspects of this? Okay. So I'm not going to go into detail around why this is one of the cornerstones, the issues to poor health that we're not speaking about enough. I'm going to highlight two things. Firstly, what's the predominant color of food that you see on the screen? Beige. So I'm going to save you 5 years of dietetic practice. Try and incorporate more than just beige into your diet. And if you look for that color from plant foods, you'll do a lot more than what you currently do potentially around your well-being. The other thing is everything we eat and drink will impact our physiology through hormones, through the blood sugar. So even if you don't understand glycemic index or glycemic load or glycemic control, just being curious about, wow, if I've got all these fluctuations happening in my body, maybe that's why my mood dips and spikes and I feel so tired in the afternoon. And how could you be curious about doing things differently? Because awareness helps us create change. We can't change anything consciously if we aren't conscious of it in the first place. And if you're super interested in getting data, there are now devices like those devices that you can wear for 2 weeks. You don't need to be diabetic to do this. Put it on for 2 weeks, eat and drink like you normally do, and just be interested in, I wonder what's happening to my blood sugar. That's how I realized that when I drive long distances, so anything more than 3 hours, I have to. It's like I try to ignore it. I can't. Buy Doritos. And you buy the large packet, right? Because it makes financial sense. And I'm always like, I'm never going to finish the bag. I always finish the bag by the time I get to Chichester. And I happened to have a trip on, and I had one of these devices on and I was like, wow. If anybody knows anything about glycemic control, mine went to almost 10. It never goes over 6. And I was like, that's interesting. I didn't realize that that particular food stuff would do that. Does that mean that I don't buy them anymore? No, but I do buy the smaller packets. So it's just given me awareness, you know? And we've got such wonderful medical science that's now giving us the opportunity to personalize our approach. So back to the seasons. Think about your spring in the morning and how potentially you could give yourself a bit more time in that relaxed state. During your day, be aware of how you move, how you breathe. If you can, take a little bit of a longer break, especially at lunchtime, and take yourself away from your desk, sit for 15 minutes, and then see if you feel any better when you come back. Then when you get to the end of the day, could you wind down a bit more slowly? Because often we go from 1 or 2 screens in the day to 3 screens at night. There's Netflix, phone, iPad, kids on their screens, partner on their, you know? Could we think about maybe doing a little bit in this autumn wind down that can help the brain slow down? And this isn't easy. It requires boundaries. And I specifically chose a map of France because some of you may know that the region of Champagne, where Champagne comes from, you have to use grapes from that region for it to be called Champagne. If not, then it's Crémant or Cava or English sparkling wine. So if you want to stay effervescent, feel sparkling, what boundaries do you need? It's a very personal thing. And it might change season to season. I found my boundaries in winter around going out and socializing and drinking alcohol are different to summer because we have more energy, there's more spring in our step. Potentially you can get away with less sleep. So be curious about your boundaries and realize when it comes to work and stopping, there will always be work to do. So there'll always be emails to answer, proposals to read, things to play around with in terms of AI, which I label as abundant inspiration. So it just feels better than artificial intelligence, you know? And it takes courage to say, I'm going to stop even though there's a lot to do, and I'm going to do something for me. And something for me doesn't have to be grand. You don't have to go to a spa. It's about sitting maybe for a few minutes at the end of your day, like you do at the start of your day, and say, what went well? What didn't go well? How do I want to feel as I go into my evening and be with my kids or family or in a different context? Small gifts. And self-care is so much more than just, I don't know, bubble baths and things like that. It's also very individualized. So I hope that this framework can give you a little bit of insight. If you would like this framework as a summary, I've got a PDF that I'd be happy to share with anybody. So if you send me a note, an email, and say, sleep information, please. Because specifically this hibernation, when you're in bed wanting to sleep, I think if anybody who does struggle with sleep, yeah, it really is an epidemic. It's so, I know what it's like to not be able to sleep. But there are strategies. All right, we just need to be able to be curious and try new things. And so there are some things that I've used that I've put together in that PDF. One thing, though, that's very important to think about is how stimulated are you right up until you go to bed? And could you create some time and a gap there? Because if we stay switched on and stay wired, even though we're tired, then that monkey mind just keeps on jumping around. Has anybody heard of NSDR, non-sleep deep rest protocols? Okay, just one nod. Well, there you go. For all the hands that went up that just said you're struggling with sleep, if you go onto YouTube and if you type in NSDR, it's a form of body scan relaxation that has some science to back up why it works, and it helps the conscious mind to get overrided and slow down into alpha brain state and helps you relax. This is the second strategy that has helped me enormously with my sleep. And I've also, last week, I was asked to do a recording of an NSDR that works for me. So I did a 9-minute recording. And if you'd like that, I'd be very happy to share it with you. Because a lot of people have said that my voice is quite soothing. So yeah, I've got that as a gift. So what I'd like you to reflect on for yourself, because we're coming towards the finish line where you're going to have one clear strategy, I'd like you to think about, out of the seasons, spring, summer, autumn, winter, in terms of times of day, morning, workday, wind down, and then time in bed sleeping, which one of those seasons, which one of that time of day do you have a longing to be stronger in, to have more rest in? And is there something you could maybe do towards that? So this could potentially become your strategy that you're going to use in a moment, because we've covered a lot of ground, right? So we've been through the Welculator. And if all this was easy, we would make changes quickly, but it's not. So what we know in terms of behavior change is that if we want to change something, we need to feel good about it, because most of us change behavior more when we feel good, not bad. And to feel good, you need to do the behavior. So if you're thinking about, well, what's something on the Welculator that I could potentially commit to doing differently? I'd like you to make it so tiny and easy and obvious that everybody here, if we bump into each other again next week, and I'm like, how's your Welculator pledge going? And you're like, ace, it's fine. And the way to do that is to make it easy, to anchor it into your diary. So for instance, if you want to drink more water, because hydration feels like a quick win for you, if you just say, I'm going to drink more water, that's very, it's vague. But if you say, I'm going to have a glass of water with my morning coffee, it's got a direct place and time, and you're probably going to then do it. And when you do it, you're going to feel good. Or hopefully you do. You acknowledge that you've actually done something, and it just takes a smile, a little acknowledgement, dopamine gets released in the learning center of the brain, and then it tells you this is something that I should repeat. So keeping this little recipe in mind, and the Welculator that we've been through, what I'd like to ask you to do is to reflect on what is one thing that you can take from today, from our time together, and put into your lifestyle soon, ideally tonight or tomorrow, because the sooner you act on something, the better. Do you have an idea of what that might be? I'd like you to turn to the person next to you. You're going to have just 2 minutes, so about a minute each, to do this exercise and share what you're thinking could work for you. Remember to challenge them as to being easy, tiny, obvious, and where and when are they going to do that activity. And then I'm going to ask you to illustrate what you're going to do on the stress ball. But first, have a chat to the person next to you. 2 minutes. What could be your tiny pledge for today? Can I have your attention? I love all the conversation and the energy. Have you got a tiny pledge? Have you got an action that you can take? So now, what I invite you to do, and the reason why I do this exercise is always neuroscience behind what I do, is hopefully this hangs around, but I know how this can become shelf development, more than self-development. But if you would like an editable version of this so that you can save it, you can get that on my website. I'd like you to take the stress ball and the marker pens that I've put down for you, and whatever your tiny pledge is that you've now, okay, I'm going to commit, this is my thing I'm going to do, to own the title Chief Effervescent Officer, I encourage you to draw a picture or something fun, right? Let's be a bit playful, engage the whole brain. No one else needs to know what it means. It's just you. So if you want to get up in the morning and hang outside for 10 minutes, maybe draw a sun. Or maybe it's just a glass, or H2O if you want to drink more water. Do you get the idea? But try not to use words. Try and use a symbol or a picture of what your tiny pledge is, so you've got a reminder, because this might hang around, hopefully, in your car or on your desk for a bit longer than just a card or a piece of paper. And once you've done your picture, if you'd like to just hold it up for me, I'm just always curious if I can see some images and things. That's something to do with sleep and sunshine. Great, 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 great. Okay, wonderful. So please remember to take the stress balls with you. Take them with you. And if you don't need the marker pens, you're welcome to leave them behind, and I'll collect them at the end. Now, as I said at the start, if all this well-being stuff was easy, can I get your attention? We're wrapping up. See, when we give ourselves permission to play, what happens? Endorphins get released and all kinds of nice energies come into the room. Whatever's on your stress ball is your strategy. You forget everything else that we've spoken about. You know that you can always come back to the Welculator. And this becomes what you do to own the title Chief Effervescent Officer. And if you'd like to be in touch, I am one of your wellbeing partners. This is important. This is life-changing work for me. It's not work, it's actually a calling. If more of us were a little bit more vital and well and alive, who knows what we could accomplish, despite what's happening out there. But thank you. I celebrate you for putting yourself first. It's not indulgent. It's an important act of self-preservation. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel.